Heroes get remembered, but legends never die. Last time on the show, we got a chance to speak to the creator of The Sandlot as the movie approaches its 30th anniversary. Here's part two of that interview. And Richard Donner, of course, from the Bronx. So many Bronx connections in our conversation today. We'll talk a lot about the Yankees and Babe Ruth, but Richard Donner, very iconic himself.
He's the coolest dude you ever met. I mean, he was just kind and always had a good word to say about somebody. And if you needed help, man, he'd take his shirt off and give it to you. He was a great guy.
Yeah, I know. I had read with him many times. He would talk about, standing up for himself and things like, not budging when it came to projects like Superman and The Omen. And yep. I feel like he was able to do some of that for you,
yeah, he did.
To kind of beef up your bravado in
yeah.
Hollywood.
No, you're absolutely, that's, you know what? You're the only person in 30 years that has ever mentioned that. And you're absolutely right. It was that, and I got to hang. He insisted, offered, and I did. From the time I got fired, I mean, I think he called me the next day, like literally, and said, "Kid, they want me to do this thing. I know you already know that, but I'm not going to do it unless you want me to do it." And I said, "Can I hang around?" He goes, 24/7. I go, "All right, let's do it." So he wanted my blessing. I gave my blessing, and true to his word, I mean, I think it was that day, maybe the next day, I was down at the studio in his office like a puppy on a leash, walking around, editorial, you name it. Every meeting he had, I don't care if it was, with the head of Warner Brothers, the head of Columbia, it didn't matter. I just sat with him for a year, more than a year. And I learned more from him than I did in 6.5 years in film school. Scads, eons, light years more. And a lot of it was skills that I didn't have at the time, which I think is what you're talking about, is it was said about Richard Donner that he didn't so much direct a movie as he hosted a set.
Great.
Yeah, right? The guy was an Ubermensch. There's just no other way to put it. And I saw that, and I saw how he talked to people. He was Dick Donner when he was talking to people, but somehow he found a little way to make it personal with each person, an actor, a crew member, or a production designer, you name it, on the show, on Radio Flyer, so that whatever it was he was thinking got into that person's head, and that person went and did it, and there it was. It came into being. That was the best thing I learned from Richard Donner. And how to talk over takes too. Editors hate me. Okay.
Well, I think it's some of that. The Bronx boy is what comes out of Richard Donner. Yeah. I feel like you have that, David. So it's
a little bit. Well, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, but close enough. Okay.
And I think that's a good segue there, obviously, David, because I feel like so much of your life is poured into both of these projects, as most of the time is the case with writers when they tackle things that mean so much to them. And we mentioned your mom's presence in your life, but I think about your story and growing up, obviously, initially in Pennsylvania and then moving to Southern California. You spoke about your mom being a waitress and just trying to keep food on the table, and basically at that time chasing your biological father in the late 60s all the way out in Cali, and also growing up with a stepdad that was abusive. Mm-hmm. You were able to basically turn some of these characters that you had mentioned before as well, that were some of these bullies that were in your life, basically able to turn these characters into heroes that people would beloved now in this story.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what happened. I mean, once, I was in that traffic, getting that idea, remembering that whole period. Yeah, the nut to crack on that story is, who wants to see a movie about a bunch of bullies beating up a kid? Nobody. I don't want to see that movie. I want to see that story, I'd seen the 400 blows and I loved it, but I don't want to see it again. I mean, unless I'm taking notes. So that was a pretty quick switch that got flipped. Okay, well, can't do it that way. I'll turn them all into heroes, and then everything else fell. It was just one of those, I don't want to call it rare, but rare enough instances in a writer's life when you go, man, I don't know how the hell, oh my God, there it is. The whole thing's right there. Me and my brother, like, Bud and Sandy from Flipper, or, that was our childhood, man, was, reruns of Flipper, Gentle Ben, you name it. Those adventure shows really, really stuck with us because we lived in an asphalt city. There wasn't a lot of nature. You had to go
And he
far.
helped your career so much too, right, David? Because you lived with him and wrote for a few years in the early 80s, and that's how you came up with Radio Flyer.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I stayed around college for a long time because I had nowhere to go. Kept racking up those student loans. And, after I got 2 MAs, 2 BAs, I go, well, I'd go for the PhD. And I was bored. I was completely, utterly bored. I wanted nothing more to do with any of that. And I had a car. I had a computer, believe it or not, because I was actually an employed screenwriter when I was in college, working, not B movies, C movies, like D, E, during the VHS revolution and stuff. So, but I had nowhere to go. So I called him up and said, hey, man, can I hang out at your place for 3 months, meaning that summer? And 3 years later, I left.
Awesome. So, great story.
Yeah, he's given me the shirt off his back. I've given me, look, he's my brother, my only brother, and I love him to death. And yes, he's in all that. I mean, Scotty Smalls is me and him. The only difference is, much like Tom Gyrie, the character, the actor that plays that, we were athletes. We could play ball. We could do all that stuff. But that was a quick necessary turn in that character. But it's all in there. I mean, listen, that thing you mentioned up front about the way my childhood should have been. Yeah, it's the way I wanted it. That's the way Sandlot's what I wanted. It didn't happen, but I got that notion from when Disneyland opened in 55. It might have been 56 or 57. It was world famous instantaneously. Everybody in the world, every king, president, you name it, head of state wanted to come and get a private tour of Disney. So I can't remember who it was, but Walt would give them the tour, walk them through Disneyland. And as he was walking down Main Street one time, somebody was looking at all those terrific shops, and he goes, man, Mr. Disney, you really did this. This is exactly the way it was. And he goes, no, it's not. It's the way it should have been.
The way it should have been. Yeah, great quote, too.
I never forgot that, man.
No, it's wonderful stuff. David, I think about the film and how special it is. And obviously, I mentioned at the top of the interview, your narration is such a big part of the film as well. I'm sure a lot of people do not know that you are the narrator since it's an uncredited role. But tell a little bit about that story, because that's a wonderful story, too, how that came about.
Yeah, it's so the actor that plays the adult Scotty Smalls is Arliss Howard. And Arliss he's a gentleman. He is an enormously likable guy, a tremendous actor, and a gentleman. He's just a very, very super well-mannered man. And after everything's done, I mean, we only shot for one day at Dodger Stadium, all the stuff with him in the announcer's booth. So, however many months later, we need to lay down the narration, and he comes into the recording studio and goes into the sound booth, and it's just me and my editor and a guy riding the board. And Arliss starts reading the narration, and it sounds something like, there was only one night game again, because Arliss is from the South, and I don't know what state, but it's pronounced. Okay, so you try and go, hey, I don't think Scotty's actually from Alabama. He's probably from New Jersey, because Scotty Smalls there. I mean, Tom Gyrie was, and he had to pronounce it. And we tried it a bunch of different ways. And less than an hour in, Arliss turns around and he looks through the recording window and he goes, Dave, I kind of brought a clarinet to this party. If you need a trumpet, you need to get somebody else. And I go, all right, you're free to go. That was it. I mean, it wasn't going to happen. So Arliss, it was hugs all around. It's all good. And sit down, and Mike Stevenson, my editor, and I are looking at each other. Well, now what do we do, dude? And he's looking at me going, I don't know, dude. What are we going to do? I don't know. And he just goes, you go do it. I said, I don't get it. He goes, you wrote it. You know how it's supposed to be spoken. You got a good voice. Go do it. And we did. We ran the picture, and I think we ran it 1/3 again. And all of that is like pretty close to a first take, all that narration. Some of it had to be sort of written on the fly to fill in gaps where the story had changed a little bit. But that was not a big deal. And people seemed to like it.
That was part 2 of our interview with David Evans. Tune in for the conclusion, part 3, next time.